Are you able to see my entire complete presentation screen? Is it visible full screen? Now today we are going to discuss a very important topic as far as your exam is concerned. It is a malignant tumors involving larynx. In fact, some question or other from this topic appears in your examination, say 80% of the time. So I expect every one of you to just be attentive in the class, and even if you have any bandwidth issues, the same lecture will be posted in your Google Classroom, and then there is actually a learning module on the same topic which has already been posted inside your classroom. I don't know, have any one of you seen that module, malignant tumors of the larynx? It's actually called tutorial. Are you accessing the classroom or not? Okay. I think the others, they're all silent. I don't know whether they are accessing or not. But even if you are not accessing, I think you should take it as a reminder and start accessing the resources which I have posted. Now let us start. And now a small introduction. A malignant tumor of the head and neck is actually a unique topic, and laryngeal malignancy happens to be the most common head and neck malignancy. And the effects of the tumor as well as the sequelae of the treatment can have a huge impact on the voice of the patient, on the swallowing mechanism of the patient, and actually also the quality of life of the patient. So the disease process per se can have a huge impact on the patient's quality of life, and also the treatment which you are offering to the patient is not going to make him feel any more good. Again, that is going to have a huge impact on the voice, huge impact on the swallowing mechanism, again leading on to a lowering of the quality of life. Now currently a lot of changes have taken place in the management modality of malignant tumors of larynx, and the survival rate and the quality of life have shown significant improvement in the past few years. And our statistics show that laryngeal malignancy happens to be nearly 2 to 5% of all the diagnosed malignant lesions. 2 to 5% of them are laryngeal malignancies worldwide. Now what exactly has changed now? Till 1990 we were operating on these patients. We used to remove the larynx, and now we didn't bother about voice, say during 1990s. And now currently we want to preserve the organ, we want to preserve a functional organ. Now the mantra is you have no business to remove an organ which is functioning. So organ preservation with maintenance of the quality of life has taken a huge front seat. So they have started using concurrent chemoradiation. So chemoradiation actually preserves the organ and tries to deal with the malignant tissue. Currently the IMRT, it is actually the intensity modulated radiotherapy, has changed the entire scenario. The success rates following IMRT is more or less similar to that of surgery, and provided the volume of the mass is less. The volume of the mass has a huge role to play in the outcome of in deciding the outcome of the treatment. So the improved success rates and reduced complication following IMRT is hugely dependent on the volume of the tumor mass. If the patient presents to you early, they stand a better chance of cure. If the patient is going to present to you rather late in the disease, then surgery is the only way out. Now larynx is supposed to carry out these functions. It is supposed to protect the lower airway. The major function of larynx is not phonation, It is protection of the lower airway. Am I clear? Somebody unmute. So, the most important function of the larynx is protection of the lower airway. The second function happens to be respiration, and the third function is only phonation. So, I have listed all these three in the order of importance, not order of what do you say, alphabetical order. So, I have listed it in the order of importance. The most important function of larynx happens to be the protection of lower airway from aspiration, protection of lower airway from aspiration, and then next comes the respiration, third comes the phonation. You should remember that generation of sound or production of sound is a feature of vertebrates. For an organism to produce sound, it should have a diaphragm. So, the diaphragm evolution, diaphragm is present only in the vertebrates. So, only vertebrates can generate sound, and humans are unique among vertebrates wherein they can generate understandable sound, and they use sound for communication. So, today you need to understand that sound generation is possible only among vertebrates, and that too diaphragm should be there for generation of sound. So, what are all the subdivisions of larynx? So, anatomically we subdivide larynx into supraglottis, glottis and subglottis. So, this is actually the supraglottic portion of the larynx. The supraglottis involves the portion of the larynx above the level of the vocal cord. So, rule of the thumb, or crudely put, supraglottic portion is that portion of the larynx which lies above the level of the vocal cord. This is actually the vocal cord. Are you able to see the picture? So, this is actually the vocal cord. So, this is the epiglottis. So, the dark line I have marked just to indicate the supraglottic area. So, this is the epiglottic. Then in front of the epiglottis there is a small space called pre-epiglottic space. So, this is the epiglottis, laryngeal surface of the epiglottis, because it faces the larynx, and the pharyngeal, the oropharynx side, that is the oral cavity surface of the epiglottis, or pharyngeal surface of the epiglottis, that is on the other side. So, your laryngeal surface of the epiglottis, then pre-epiglottic space, the laryngeal aspects of aryepiglottic fold. This is the arytenoid cartilage, this is the aryepiglottic fold, and then false card. This is the false card. Do you see my cursor? This is the false card. So, the thickening above the level of the, this is the vocal cord. This is the vocal cord, and above the level of the vocal cord is the false cord. Are you able to see the false cord? This is the vocal cord and this is the false cord. So, this is actually the supraglottic portion of the larynx. This is actually the supraglottic portion of the larynx. So, which is the lowermost level of the supraglottic portion? That is actually the apex. If you draw a horizontal line at the level of the apex of the ventricles, I have told you this is the ventricular band. This is the ventricular band. So, this should be considered as a triangular portion. Are you able to see the ventricular band? Something like a triangle. I am marking it out with my cursor. Are you able to see it? This is one side, this is the other side. So, this is the apex. So, if you draw a horizontal line connecting both the apex, the portion of the larynx which lie below this line is glottis, and above this line is supraglottis. So, this line is very important, because the line you draw between the apex of both your ventricle, the line you draw connecting both, horizontal line you draw connecting both the apex of the ventricle is very important, because it is this area where the squamous epithelium of the oropharynx becomes the respiratory epithelium. That is actually the transition zone. That is where the squamous epithelium of the oropharynx changes into respiratory epithelium. And mind you, this transitional zone is always highly unstable, and malignancy usually commonly occurs in this transitional zone, and this transitional zone also goes by another name known as marginal zone. So, marginal zone or transitional zone are the same, where the squamous epithelium slowly gets changed into another type of epithelium, that is a respiratory epithelium. So this marginal zone area is more prone for development of malignancy. Now this is the glottis. So this is actually the vocal cord, which you see I have marked out the vocal cord. So this is actually the glottic area. This is the anterior commissure. This is left vocal cord, right vocal cord. You are seeing a small tumor here, and this is the apex of the vocal cord. This is actually the anterior commissure. This is the anterior commissure. This is also known as Broyles ligament. It's also known as Broyles ligament. And then this area marked in black, this is the posterior commissure. And so the glottis, components of glottis include both the vocal cords, the true cords, the anterior commissure, the posterior commissure, and the subglottic region, that is roughly 1 centimeter below the level of the true cords, also portion of glottis. So this 1 centimeter below the level of the true vocal cord happens to be glottis. Why that 1 centimeter? So embryologically, the supraglottis, glottis and subglottis originate from 3 different pharyngeal clefts. So since embryologically the origin of these areas are different, so you need to divide these areas embryologically. So the dividing line, embryological dividing line of glottis, it falls roughly 1 centimeter below the level of the true vocal cord. 1 centimeter below the level of the true vocal cord. And then the posterior commissure is also included as part of the glottis. You want me to slow down, or my pace is okay? Then let us come to subglottic. This is actually a total laryngectomy specimen, which just I have given this photograph out just to show you the subglottic area. So you see a huge mass here. Are you able to see the mass here? This is the vocal cord. This is the vocal cord. The mass is going above the level of the vocal cord, involves the vocal cord, and even comes below the level of the vocal cord. So this area which I am pointing it out to you, just 1 centimeter below the level of the vocal cord, up to that level happens to be the portion of the glottis, and below that level lies the subglottic area. So 1 centimeter below the true cords and extending into the trachea, that happens to be the subglottic area. Let me go to the applied anatomy. Why should you divide larynx anatomically into three different levels? It helps in the classification of tumors, number 1. Then it also helps the surgeon to decide the optimal treatment modality, and then it also helps the surgeon in determining the prognosis of the disease. All these 3 things are possible only when you manage to divide the larynx into 3 subheadings. I think some of you want to join, so I'll try and permit, but this cannot go on, I say. This is the last time I'm going to permit somebody joining late. You should have joined 10 minutes earlier. So the applied anatomy, I have already told you why there is this division of the larynx into supraglottis, glottis and subglottis is important, because it helps us to classify the tumor scientifically. It helps us in deciding the optimal treatment modality. Then it helps us in determining the prognosis of the disease. Then we have already seen in our introduction the supraglottis, glottis and subglottis. This is actually a small reminder, again reinforcing the level of glottic areas. Supraglottis is that portion of the larynx which lie above the level of the vocal cords. Glottis is actually include that portion of the larynx between the vocal cords, and then subglottis is that area which lie below the level of the vocal cords. So let us see a little bit about the various growth that can involve various levels of the larynx. Tumors arising from the true vocal cords, which includes the anterior and posterior commissures, are considered to be glottic tumors. I repeat again, tumors arising from the true vocal cords, including the commissures, are considered to be glottic tumors. These glottic tumors have a favorable prognosis because the most important complaint of patient with glottic tumors is hoarseness of voice. So that really affects a patient very early, during the very early stages of the tumor. So they will seek medical help during the very early phase of the disease. So you will be able to catch these patients very early. So tumors arising from the vocal cord has a better prognosis than tumors arising from elsewhere in the larynx. The second important reason for the better prognosis of tumors involving glottic area is vocal cords are devoid of lymphatics. I repeat again, vocal cords are devoid of lymphatics. So when there are no lymphatics, it goes without saying, nodal metastasis is not possible, or it occurs rather late in vocal cord tumors. So the vocal cords, they don't have lymphatics. So that again adds to the prognostic value of these tumors. The next is the tumor arising from the false cords. Arytenoids, epiglottic, ariepiglottic 4 are all considered to be supraglottic tumors. And mind you, supraglottic area has rich lymphatic supply, and moreover bilateral lymphatic supply is also common in this area. So these patients will commonly present with nodal metastasis even before they clinically describe a mass. Their major complaint would be swelling in the neck. So that will be the commonest complaint. So by the time patient comes to you, the metastasis would have already occurred in tumors involving supraglottic area. And then subglottic tumors, again I have told you, they arise from the mucosa starting just 1 centimeter below the apex of the ventricle, and it extends up to the level of the lower border of the cricoid cartilage. So subglottic tumor again has worse prognosis because again that area has lymphatics, and these lymphatics drain into the paratracheal lymph nodes. There is no way we can surgically clear the paratracheal and thoracic trachea, parathoracic trachea lymph nodes. So it is very difficult to clear this area. So prognostically subglottic tumor carry the worst prognosis. And then tumors involving the tongue base and vallicula, they are considered to be oropharyngeal lesions, and they are not laryngeal lesions. I repeat again, growth involving posterior third of the tongue or tongue base or vallicula, they are all considered to be oropharyngeal lesions, and they are not laryngeal lesions. I have already told you in our introduction slide that there is something called transitional zone, where the oropharyngeal mucosa, that is the squamous epithelium, changes or transitions itself into respiratory epithelium, which happens to be ciliated columnar epithelium. So that zone, marginal zone, is an unstable area where commonly malignant transformation arises. Let us go to the epidemiology. So the incidence is actually 4 times higher in men. The incidence of laryngeal cancer is really 4 times higher in men than in women because of the smoking. Incidence of smoking again is common in men. And then it is more common in people above the age of 60, and significantly it is less common in people below the age of 40. And our epidemiological study clearly shows there is a gradual reduction, overall reduction in the incidence, say beginning from 2000, because slowly the incidence of smoking, the number of smokers are on the wane, the incidence of smoking is coming down, and patients belonging to the poor socioeconomic strata, again they show an increased incidence of supraglottic carcinoma. Then glottic cancer is the commonest cancer involving the larynx. Glottic cancer in fact constitute about 60% of all laryngeal malignancy. Sorry. So, glottic cancer really constitutes 60% of all laryngeal malignancy, and supraglottic cancers make up 40% of all laryngeal malignancy, and subglottic cancers are very rare. They constitute less than 1% of all laryngeal malignancies. Now, am I audible? Are you able to see my slides? Okay. Now, this is actually a diagrammatic representation of all the etiological causes of head and neck cancer. The most important culprit, etiological culprit, happens to be your cigarette or cigar or BD, smoking. Then, the next comes alcohol. Alcohol and smoking, they really increase the risk of laryngeal malignancy 4 times. I repeat again, combination of alcohol and smoking increases the incidence of laryngeal malignancy nearly 4 times. Then next comes the genetic causes, genetic predisposition to the development of laryngeal cancer. Next comes exposure to irradiation, then exposure to toxins, then exposure to papilloma, human papilloma virus. Human papilloma virus is another etiology of, most common etiology of head and neck cancer. So we need to focus on the most important culprit, that happens to be the tobacco. Tobacco nearly contains 4,000 different chemicals in varying proportions, and among these 4,000 chemicals, about 43 of them have been identified definitely to be carcinogens. I repeat again, tobacco has literally 43 positively identified carcinogens, and these include polycyclic hydrocarbons. Next comes nitrosamine. The third comes radioactive polonium. So all these things are potential carcinogens present in tobacco. Then if you use a tobacco which is air processed tobacco increases the carcinogenicity by 4 times. Air processed tobacco is used in cigars and in BDs. So air processed tobacco increases the carcinogenicity by 4 times. And then when you combine smoking along with alcohol, again it increases the carcinogenicity again by 4 times, because alcohol acts as a solvent for the carcinogens. The carcinogens gets dissolved in the alcohol, and then is able to permeate into the interior of the cell, because it has dissolved itself into alcohol. Alcohol can permeate into the insides of the cell, into the cytoplasm of the cell. And then risk of laryngeal malignancy is highest among the current smokers, and is also proportional to the number of cigarettes that they smoke per day. I repeat again, the risk of developing laryngeal malignancy is highest among the current smokers, and it is also proportional to the number of cigarettes they smoke per day. Next comes human papilloma virus infection. So human papilloma virus infection is slowly taking the front seat, so because the number of smokers have reduced, but still the laryngeal carcinoma or the carcinoma tumors involving the larynx incidence has not come down so dramatically. So because we are having another agent which has the potential to cause tumors within the larynx, that is human papilloma viral infection. So this human papilloma viral infection have been linked very clearly with tumors in the oropharynx. Without doubt, human papilloma virus infection have been linked with the tumors of oropharynx, and the current studies, it tells us that human papilloma virus can also cause laryngeal cancer, because the human papilloma virus genes have been identified in the laryngeal cancer tissue. How this virus gets into our system? It is the common practice of oral sex again has a predisposition to development of human papilloma viral infection. So, because of the common practice of oral sex, the incidence of oropharyngeal malignancy and the incidence of laryngeal malignancy are slowly on the rise. So, what are all the types of human papilloma virus that can potentially cause malignant transformation? One is the high risk type of human papilloma virus, which happens to be type 16 and type 18. So, type 16 and type 18 are commonly found in the genitalia. So, the high risk human papilloma virus types are seen in the human genitalia. So, the high risk types include type 16 and type 18. Then comes the medium risk ones, where they are type 31 and type 33, and low risk human papilloma virus, which carries the low risk of development of tumors, are type 6 and type 11. So, the other risk factors which can cause malignant tumors involving larynx include exposure to asbestos, exposure to wood dust, exposure to coal dust, and exposure to cement dust. Then genetic syndromes like Fanconi anemia, congenital dyskeratosis are all associated with high risk of laryngeal tumors. Then smoking cannabis again can cause laryngeal malignancy. Posterior laryngeal malignancy can occur in patients with laryngopharyngeal reflux or reflux esophagitis. And then radiation exposure can cause development of laryngeal malignancy. Now, let us come to the molecular biology. This actually tells us at the genetic level what exactly predisposes to laryngeal cancer. So, these patients commonly they have deletions of chromosome 3p and 18q. You all know the short and long arm of chromosomes? I am waiting for an answer. You all know what I mean by 3p and 18q? You know what you mean by P arm? You know what you mean by P arm and Q arm? Can somebody tell me what you mean by P arm? P arm of a chromosome is what? Who is answering? I want the name. Who answered now, pa? Okay. So, okay, pa. Very nice. So, deletions of chromosomes, say 3p and 18q is seen in these patients, and then amplification and overexpression of epidermal growth factor gene. The next common issue as far as the molecular biology or genetic biology is concerned is there is a certain amount of amplification and overexpression of epidermal growth factor gene. So, the epidermal growth factor gene also goes by another name CCRBB. So, this CCRBB is the epidermal growth factor gene. Then amplification of INIT2 and BCL1 have been found in laryngeal carcinoma. Then gene products like NRAS is actually one of the gene products, has been found in very high levels in patients with laryngeal carcinoma. And most important thing is 60% of patients with laryngeal carcinoma, they demonstrate mutations involving P53 gene. So, 60% of laryngeal squamous cell carcinomas demonstrate mutations of P53 gene. So, the commonest pathological tumor involving larynx is squamous cell carcinoma. Squamous cell carcinoma happens to be the most common laryngeal pathological type of tumor. Then human papilloma virus, HPV virus genes have been demonstrated in nearly 15% of these patients. Then amplification of 11q13 region is again a frequent aberration in patients. Then suppression of P53 tumor suppressor gene is again seen commonly in these patients. So, P53 tumor suppression gene is suppressed in these patients. So, this is actually a brief overview of how a carcinogen pushes a cell to become malignant. So what happens is carcinogen gets into the body, it gets broken down or metabolized into electrophilic intermediaries. So these intermediaries can be detoxified in the liver, oxygenated in the liver, and can be excreted. So liver plays a huge role in protecting your body from malignant carcinogens. Then if it escapes the liver protection, it binds to the DNA inside the cell. When it binds to the DNA inside the cell will attempt to repair its DNA, and if the repair is successful, it will become a normal cell. But if the DNA repair fails, so this cell will be identified as abnormal cell and it will be destroyed by killer T cells, killer lymphocytes. So the cell will undergo death. So if your carcinogen or electrophilic intermediaries which are formed on metabolizing the carcinogen binds to the DNA, if the DNA repair mechanism fails, the cell will die. If the DNA repair mechanism succeeds, it will become a normal cell. Supposing this binding causes a permanent DNA lesion, if the DNA code is altered permanently, what happens is the cell starts to proliferate. So up to this stage, permanent DNA lesion is actually the initiation phase of the carcinogenicity. So up to this level is the initiation phase. So when there is a permanent DNA lesion, this leads to active cellular proliferation. This active cellular proliferation is actually known as the pre-neoplastic stage. And this inside this pre-neoplastic stage, again subsequent mutations also possible. Then ultimately these cells become tumor cells. So this is where the promotion of malignancy occurs. Here the initiation of malignancy is here and promotion of malignancy occurs here. So since many of you are using a mobile to listen to this lecture, I think it will be nice if you can take a screenshot of this particular slide. I will leave this slide for a few seconds so that you can take a screenshot for your ready reference. The moment you say yes, I will go to the next one. Okay. Then let us go to the pathological aspects of laryngeal malignancy. The common type of laryngeal carcinoma, I have already told you, is squamous cell carcinoma. And then the exact assessment of the specimen needs lot of coordination between the surgeon and the pathologist. So what are all the factors that a surgeon and the pathologist need to take into consideration when they study this tissue? They should first assess the size of the tumor, and then they should grade the size of the primary tumor. Then they should assess the pattern of invasion. Pattern of invasion can be assessed only by imaging. Pattern of invasion can be assessed by CT or MRI imaging. And then proximity of the carcinoma to the resected margin. So what happens is when you send out your total laryngectomy specimen or partial laryngectomy specimen to the pathologist, you should mark the margins and send it to the pathologist, and they should be able to see a clear margin between the malignant tissue and a normal tissue. So you should have given adequate margins while you resect the tumor tissue. You should give out adequate margin, at least a 5 mm margin is a must. So now let us focus a little bit on pre-malignant lesions. So these pre-malignant lesions are commonly identified in patients with lesions involving the vocal cords, because they seek early medical attention, because hoarseness of voice is the predominant complaint in patients with pre-malignant lesions involving the vocal cord. So the pre-malignant lesions involving the vocal cords include leukoplakia, keratosis. Keratosis is the atypia, carcinoma in situ with micro-invasion. So here this picture shows a leukoplakic lesion. This is actually a leukoplakic lesion in the left vocal cord. So uniformly what happens is the first starting area of vocal cord lesion will be at the junction of anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3. So it is actually the most of the malignant lesions, most of the leukoplakic lesions and most of the pre-malignant lesions involving the vocal cord begins at the junction of the anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3. That this is roughly the junction, because that is the most actively vibrating area of the vocal cord. I repeat again, the early lesions of vocal cord always starts or begins at the junction of the anterior 1/3 and the posterior 2/3. So that is where that particular area is the most vibrating portion of your vocal cord. So am I audible now? Hey, why some of you still want to join the class so late? It is already 10:27. We start. So I'll allow them for now. Let me allow them, but I can't keep doing it always. I am not going to allow anymore. So you people, you would have been doing tuning fork test. I think I have already taken a class on tuning fork test. Where exactly you strike the tuning fork to make it vibrate? Anybody? Where exactly you strike the tuning fork to make it vibrate? If you don't know, please say you don't know. Let us not waste our time. I will tell the answer and go proceed. No, which portion of the tuning fork you strike? I remember clearly telling you this. I don't know whether you people attended that class or not. So you strike the tuning fork at the junction of upper 1/3 and lower 2/3, because that happens to be the most vibrant portion of the tuning fork. That vibrates the maximum. The same analogy holds good for a vocal cord also. So that the junction of the anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3. So when you want to strike a tuning fork to make it vibrate, you always strike it at the junction of the upper 1/3 and lower 2/3. Am I clear? Okay. Now leukoplakia, this is actually the photograph of the leukoplakic plaque. So this is actually a thickened mucosa which is always associated with keratosis. It also appears like a whitish patch, and sometimes these leukoplakic patches can appear reddish or velvety, and when it appears reddish, it is known as erythroplakia. And leukoplakia are commonly caused due to mucosal irritation due to smoking. Then keratosis is actually defined as epithelial hyperplasia where the maturation pattern of the cells are orderly. So in keratosis there is epithelial hyperplasia, but the maturation pattern of the cells are orderly. The cellular elements are normal in their appearance and architecture. The cellular elements are normal in appearance and architecture, and they demonstrate some degree of surface keratinization. So this surface keratinization could be of two types. One is orthokeratotic. Orthokeratotic means formulation of a anuclear keratin layer. So in orthokeratotic type of keratinization, the keratin layer will have cells without nucleus. I repeat again, in orthokeratotic keratinization, the keratin layer will contain cells which are anuclear, whereas in parakeratotic lesions, the keratinocytes will have nucleus within them. So that is the difference between orthokeratotic and parakeratotic lesions in keratosis. Then another stage in the pre-malignant lesion is keratosis atypia. So in this condition, keratosis is associated with some degree of cellular atypia. and there is also an associated disturbance in the maturation sequence. So, in this condition, keratosis is associated with some degree of cellular atypia and there is a disturbance in maturation sequence. Then keratosis with atypia can be classified into or graded into mild, moderate and severe. And I should like to point out here now that keratosis with atypia is frequently associated with laryngeal carcinoma. These patients, they land up with laryngeal malignancy at a future date. So, next comes the carcinoma in situ. So, in this disorder what happens? The epithelium clearly shows or fulfills the general criteria we used to classify malignancy, and these cells, they show all the feature of malignant cells, but there is no invasion beyond the confines of basement membrane. So, these cells, these abnormal cells or potentially malignant cells lie above the level of the basement membrane, and there is actually a full thickness involvement of these atypical cells. The maturation pattern is abnormal. These cells have loss of polarity. These cells are hypercellular. There is nuclear enlargement. These cells show increased mitotic activity, and there are also atypical mitotic figures seen. And then next comes carcinoma in situ with microinvasion. See, here the cells are more or less, they resemble a carcinoma in situ, but there is a variable amount of basement membrane violation. So, these cells, even though they manifest as carcinoma, as they show the features of carcinoma in situ, but there is a certain amount of varying amounts of violation of the basement membrane. So, this is actually the earliest histological evidence of invasion of basement membrane, and this is the invasive malignancy, the earliest stage of invasive malignancy you see in the patient. Now, Christman was the first person to classify or use a terminology known as laryngeal intraepithelial neoplasia. So, he combined all these leukoplakia, erythroplakia, all these things under three headings. LIN 1 is mild dysplasia with keratosis. LIN 2, LIN is laryngeal intraepithelial neoplasia. LIN 2 was moderate dysplasia with intracellular dyskeratosis. LIN 3 is severe dysplasia and carcinoma in situ. So, this is actually Christman's classification. And supposing a patient comes to you with leukoplakia or erythroplakia or carcinoma in situ type of picture. So, how are you going to manage these patients? There should be a management algorithm. So, this shows the potential management algorithm. If the focus of involvement is single, so you can go ahead and excise the lesion using cold steel, that is a conventional microlaryngeal excision, or you can use a carbon dioxide laser excision, or currently a coablator is available. You can use coablation to remove these lesions, and then you should also actively modify the risk factor which should have caused these lesions, or you should force the patient to stop smoking, stop drinking, and also put the patient on aggressive anti-reflex therapy. And then still, if there is recurrence of the lesion, you regularly follow up the patient. If there is persistent or residual or recurrence of lesions, you manage these lesions as T1 carcinoma. So, these early lesions should not be irradiated. Let me tell you, the early lesions of the vocal cord should be managed surgically. They should be managed either by stripping the vocal cord or by removing the vocal cord totally. Because if you subject these patients to irradiation, there is always a chance, higher chance for them to develop a florid malignancy. So, the early lesions are better managed surgically than by irradiation. So, radiotherapy can be considered only when the patient is still smoking, when the patient is a huge anesthetic risk, or when the patient is not prepared to take up the surgical procedure. So, these are all the probable indications of radiotherapy in these patients. For all the early lesions, it is always better to manage these lesions surgically by stripping the vocal cord of the lesion or by removing the entire vocal cord, and that procedure is known as cordectomy. So I think if you can take a snapshot of this slide also, that will help you. You just acknowledge after you have completed the snapshot. Thank you. Now, the next important thing we want to see is how these tumors are going to spread inside the larynx. So, the anatomically larynx is a very complex structure, and embryologically it arises from two different embryological pharyngeal pouches. So, growth and spread of laryngeal cancer is actually determined by the size of origin of the tumor. So, one of the most important factor in determining the direction of the spread happens to be the anatomical barriers. Our larynx is endowed with a number of anatomical barriers that can delay the spread or can hold the tumors for some time. So, that is one thing which really helps the surgeon to remove these masses in toto and to give the patient relief. In fact, let me tell you, I have nearly 30 total laryngectomy patients I have performed surgery on, still alive. They have been alive for good 6-7 years. So, this tells you the effectiveness of surgery, provided you do it. If you remove the tumor end mass, these patients will survive and live longer. So I have nearly a huge number of patients who have undergone laryngectomy by me, and they are in regular touch with me. They speak to me over the phone, and every year we have a laryngectomy day where these patients get together, they join together, spend one day together. So that is how these patients are, and you can give a good life to them provided you catch these patients early and operate on them early. So, local spread of tumors can occur along the tissue plane, can occur via the lymphatics, and the tissue plane spread is guided by the embryological boundaries between these various areas. So, first of the most important natural barrier for tumor spread happens to be the perichondrial covering, perichondrium covering the laryngeal cartilages. The first boundary or the first barrier to tumor spread happens to be the perichondrial lining of the laryngeal cartilages. And laryngeal cartilages, let me tell you, they are all avascular. So, the cartilages generally are avascular. They derive nourishment from the perichondrium. So, avascular tissue resists tumor spread. And then there are numerous membranes and ligaments inside larynx, and these membranes and ligaments, they again delay or hold these tumors from spreading to other areas. The next important barrier happens to be the anterior commissure tendon or Broyles ligament. It also goes by another name, Broyles ligament. This is again another short notes they ask you, anterior commissure tendon or Broyles ligament. Broyles ligament prevents growth from spreading from one vocal cord to another, or from growth spreading from the glottic to the subglottic area. So, for the growth to spread from one vocal cord to the another, it needs to breach the anterior commissure tendon or Broyles ligament. Again, for growth to spread from the vocal cord to the subglottic area, this anterior commissure tendon again needs to be breached. Then next comes the most important membrane, happens to be the quadrangular membrane. The larynx actually, it contains a elastic membrane, and this membrane lies between the laryngeal mucosa and the outer surface of the larynx. So, larynx has an elastic membrane. It is also known as a quadrangular membrane. It lies between the laryngeal mucosa and the lateral laryngeal space. So, this membrane is an important barrier in preventing spread from growth involving the laryngeal mucosa into the outer areas or paraglottic spread of these lesions. The superior portion of this quadrangular membrane forms a supraglottic barrier. So, the superior portion of this elastic membrane is also known as quadrangular membrane. This forms a supraglottic barrier. So, this membrane prevents the growth from spreading to the, from supraglottic growth to spread to the glottic area, or glottic growth to spread to the supraglottic area. So, this membrane plays a huge role in stopping or delaying the spread of lesions from the vocal cord to the supraglottic area or from the supraglottic area to the vocal cord. This membrane, quadrangular membrane, runs from the lateral aspect of the epiglottis up to the level of the arytenoids, and then it also extends inferiorly up to the level of the ventricle. So this is actually the quadrangular membrane. So it extends from the epiglottis above. This is the epiglottis. So it extends from the epiglottis above to the ventricular band. This is the ventricular band. So this area is the quadrangular membrane. This membrane prevents tumor spread from the supraglottic area to the glottis, and tumors from the glottic area spreading to the supraglottis is prevented or stopped or delayed by the presence of this quadrangular membrane. So next comes the conus elasticus. I like to go back to the same picture again. So this is the area. Are you able to see this picture? So this is actually a single big elastic membrane. The superior portion of the elastic membrane happens to be the quadrangular membrane, and the inferior portion happens to be the conus elasticus. The conus elasticus extends from the level of the vocal cord up to the level of the superior border of the cricoid cartilage. This is the cricoid cartilage. This is the cricoid cartilage. This is the arytenoid. The conus elasticus extends from the vocal cord up to the superior border of the cricoid cartilage. In fact, the free margin of the conus elasticus happens to be your vocal cord. I repeat again, the free margin of conus elasticus is your vocal cord. You just have a look again, keep looking at this picture. This conus elasticus is a very important portion of your larynx. The superior portion of the conus elasticus, which extends from the arytenoid, that is the vocal process of the arytenoid, up to the level of the thyroid cartilage. So this is the cut portion of the thyroid cartilage. This is the vocal process of the arytenoid. It extends from the vocal process of the arytenoid up to the lamina, thyroid cartilage, and then inferiorly it extends from the vocal cord up to the level of the superior border of the cricoid. So that is the conus elasticus. So this conus elasticus is a definitive boundary between glottic and subglottic region. So tumors from the glottic region and tumors from the subglottic region is delayed from spreading to these areas again, vice versa, subglottis to glottis and glottis to subglottis, by the presence of this membrane, conus elasticus. Next important barrier which we like to describe are the ventricles. Ventricles actually separate. Ventricles are these thickened mucosal lining which are seen above the level of the vocal cords. These ventricles separate the glottic region from the supraglottic region. So for the tumor to spread from supraglottis to glottis or from glottis to supraglottis, it should first breach this laryngeal ventricle. So it should first extend deep into the lateral angle of the ventricle adjacent to the ala of the thyroid cartilage. So it should get into the lateral angle of the ventricle adjacent to the thyroid cartilage, and then it has to extend vertically. Then only it can come out of the confines of the supraglottis to extend into the glottis and subglottic area. Then how tumors can breach the cartilage? I have already told you the avascular cartilage is a very important protector of your or delays the tumor spread. So cartilage invasion actually will occur only in areas where cartilages have undergone ossification. So cartilage invasion is seen only in areas of ossification, and this is attributed to vascularization of the cartilage. And cartilage invasion by tumor cells actually, they are preceded by resorption of the cartilage by osteoclasts or chondroblasts. And then this terminology, transglottic growth, is actually used to define tumors involving supraglottis, glottis and subglottis. I repeat again, transglottic growth is a terminology which is commonly used to describe lesions involving supraglottis, glottis and subglottis. So now here this is actually a supraglottic tumor. The tumor cells are all marked in red. So this is actually supraglottic area. This is the false card or the ventricle. Ventricle is nothing but the false card. This is the false card. This is actually the thyroid cartilage. So tumor can spread anteriorly. The tumor can spread laterally. When they spread laterally, they will breach the thyroid cartilage. They will involve the subglottic area. They can spread posteriorly. When this tumor, supraglottic tumor, spreads posteriorly, it will cause fixity of the arytenoid. The arytenoid will stop moving. When the arytenoid stops moving, the vocal cord will stop moving, because the vocal cord is attached to the vocalis process of the arytenoid. So this tumor can involve the arytenoid cartilage and can cause vocal cord fixity. So for the supraglottic lesions to cause hoarseness of voice, it should come out of the confines of the supraglottic area to involve the glottic area, or it should involve the arytenoid cartilage, thereby fixing the cartilage, preventing its movement. So these are the two things which needs to happen for these patients to develop hoarseness of voice. So this tumor spread from the supraglottic area can occur anteriorly, posteriorly and laterally. All the three possibilities are there. Next comes glottic spread. I would like if some of you can take snapshots of these pictures, because just by viewing these pictures you will be able to really write a beautiful essay about tumor spread inside the larynx. So here, this is actually the true vocal cord on either side. This is the anterior commissure tendon or the Broyles ligament. This is the cricoarytenoid joint. So this tumor can spread anteriorly, involving the free margin of the vocal cord up to the level of the anterior commissure. If it breaches the anterior commissure, it can get subglottically it can spread into the subglottic zone. So involvement of the anterior commissure tendon can cause subglottic spread. It can also come out of the confines of the thyroid cartilage and involve the thyroid gland. So that can happen in the anterior spread. And then lateral spread, it can involve the paraglottic area. So this paraglottic area will again cause cord fixation. And then it can spread posteriorly. It can spread posterior-medially. If it is going to spread posterior-medially, what happens? It can cause stridor. If it is going to spread posterior-medially, it will block the airway and the patient will have stridor if it spreads posterior-medially. If it spreads posterior-laterally, it will cause arytenoid fixation, and then it will cause vocal cord fixation. So anterior spread by the mass per se, if it involves the vocalis muscle, it will cause fixity of the vocal cord. Then if it spreads posteriorly, it can cause recurrent laryngeal involvement and leading on to vocal cord paralysis. If it causes involvement of the arytenoid cartilage, it can cause fixity of the arytenoid, again cause hoarseness of voice. So here, lesions involving the glottis can cause hoarseness of voice at the early stage of the lesion itself. So this is actually a sagittal section showing how the glottic spread occurs. This is actually the anterior, this is the posterior, this is the vocal process of the arytenoid, this is the vocal cord. So it can spread anteriorly, breaching the anterior commissure tendon or Broyles ligament and come outside the confines of the larynx. It can spread posteriorly, the same thing I am describing. It can spread posteriorly, it can cause fixity of the cricoid cartilage. Then it can involve or breach this very important ligament. That is, this is the thyroid, this is the hyoid. So thyroid hyoid ligament is breached. So growth, caudal growth, vocal cord growth can spread to the supraglottic area by this way. So it can breach the quadrangular. This is the quadrangular membrane. So it breaches the quadrangular membrane, and then it has got another membrane to breach. That happens to be this is the thyroid cartilage and hyoid bone. So thyroid hyoid membrane. So this thyroid hyoid membrane is breached and the mass can get into the supraglottic area. So this is actually the glottic spread, which is explained in a sagittal picture. I have already told you the transglottic spread of tumor means the tumor is involving supraglottis, glottis and subglottis. That is what is shown in this diagram. So this is the supraglottic area, entire area. This is supraglottic area. This is the vocal cord. This is the vocal cord. Two cords, and this is the arytenoid. So this is the vocal cord area, glottic area, and then subglottic area. So all the three zones of the larynx are involved in a transglottic spread. So transglottic tumors are absolute indication for total laryngectomy. So if you want to do surgery is the only way out in these patients, because the transglottic growth respond very poorly to radiotherapy because the sheer bulk of the tumor is enormous. So if in these patients it is always prudent to debulk these tumors or remove the tumors before subjecting the patient to irradiation. So this is actually, this slide again offers you some of the tips for clinical examination of patients with laryngeal malignancy. If the malignancy happens to involve the supraglottic area, primarily you need to focus on epiglottis, you need to focus on epiglottic petiole, then you need to focus on intralaryngeal mucosa, and you need to focus on false cords. All these areas can be involved in supraglottis, and then you need to look for involvement of pre-epiglottic space, that is a space in front of the epiglottis, and then you need to look out for involvement of the anterior commissure. You need to look out for the involvement of paraglottic space. Paraglottic space is nothing but the lateral space which is available on either side of the vocal cord, and then vocal cord per se you need to look into, and then laryngeal cartilages you need to carefully palpate and look for any breach. And then glottic malignancy, so you need to focus on the anterior portion of the cord, posterior portion of the cord, anterior commissure and posterior commissure. Then here you should look for involvement of the commissure area, anterior commissure area, opposite cord, look for involvement of thyroid cartilage, look for involvement of cricothyroid membrane. So this I will discuss a little bit in detail, because this is one vital membrane which needs to be breached by the tumor to enable it to spread to the subglottic area. So thyroid cartilage and cricothyroid membrane involvement again should be checked, and arytenoid cartilage, cricoarytenoid joint, all these things, posterior commissure area, paraglottic space, supraglottic and subglottic spread are all should be assessed in glottic malignancy. In subglottic malignancy, you need to assess the trachea, thyroid gland and cervical esophagus for spread. So now we will focus on growth vocal cord. So growth vocal cord is actually defined as malignancy involving the true cords, which includes the anterior and posterior commissure. Squamous cell carcinoma happens to be the most common lesion. It's a very common laryngeal malignancy. I have been telling you vocal cord lesions are the most common laryngeal malignancy, and again it has excellent prognosis because it doesn't have lymphatics. So nodal metastasis occurs very late in these patients, and they seek medical attention pretty early, and then breach into the Rinke space. Rinke space is nothing but subepithelial space in the vocal cord. So the vocal cord subepithelial space is known as Rinke space. So breach into the Rinke space only will allow the growth to spread to the entire length of the cord. For the growth to spread to the entire length of the vocal cord, the Rinke space should be breached. So now, what are all the features of vocal cord growth? This is actually a photograph, endoscopic photograph of a patient with vocal cord growth. So vocal cord growth, again, feature, it's actually, I have already given you this definition. The third time I am saying you here, this cancer involves the true cords, anterior and posterior commissure. Squamous cell carcinoma is a common lesion, most common lesion. It's a very common malignancy, very common laryngeal malignancy. Again, I am re-stressing because these are the points, these are the take-home points I want you to go home with. So these patients have very good prognosis because of the poor lymphatics of the vocal folds, and the Rinke space needs to be breached for allowing the lesion to spread to the entire length of the vocal cord. So how exactly the tumor spread? Tumor spreads along the free margin of the vocal cord. The spread is rather slow and predictable. They spread along the free margin. Hoarseness of the voice is very early in the lesion, and the patient seeks medical attention rather early. Invasion of thyroid muscle causes vocal cord fixity. Now, I have already told you we need to spend little time with this cricothyroid triangle. So where exactly this cricothyroid triangle is shown in the diagram here. This is thyroid cartilage, this is the cricoid cartilage, this is the cricothyroid muscle, this is the cricothyroid muscle. So this area, triangular area, this is the cricothyroid membrane, cricothyroid muscle, cricothyroid membrane, and this is the triangle. So this tumors from the glottis area, from the vocal cord area, has to come out through this cricothyroid triangle to involve the other areas of larynx. So this triangle is really very important because it is the first level of protection against the tumor spread from the vocal cord to the subglottic area. So tumor can extend out, can escape outside the larynx. So tumor, glottic tumor and subglottic tumor can escape outside the confines of the larynx through this cricothyroid triangle. So, and what are all the clinical features of patients with glottic growth? These patients have hoarseness in voice and large lesions involving the vocal folds will have breathing difficulty or stridor or noisy breathing, and these patients may even have a history of local hemoptysis on and off, and in advanced lesions nodal metastasis also can be seen. Indirect laryngoscopic examination will help you to visualize these tumors. Then how are you going to manage these patients with vocal fold malignancy? You need to do a biopsy. Then biopsy is actually to confirm the diagnosis, and then you need to do a tracheostomy if there is a compromise in the airway, and then definitely treatment is going to be a cordectomy. If the cord is mobile, you irradiate the patient. If the cord is fixed, you go ahead and do a cordectomy. So now this video clipping will show you the video laryngoscopic finding of a supraglottic lesion. So this is I am using a 70-degree laryngoscope. So here you put the 70-degree laryngoscope, you are able to see that this is actually the epiglottis. Are you able to see the video? This is the tumor mass. This is the tumor mass. So now the tumor mass is sitting. So this is the epiglottis. The aryepiglottic fold is this area. The tumor is virtually sitting on the aryepiglottic fold. The aryepiglottic fold happens to be the supraglottic area. You see the vocal cord moving. So this cord is fixed, the other cord is moving. So you see the right cord, this cord is moving, this cord is not moving. This is fixed because of the tumor. So this is actually the tumor mass. Supraglottic tumor sitting on top of the aryepiglottic fold. This is the epiglottis, that is arytenoid cartilage, aryepiglottic fold. Now we are going to see how a biopsy is being taken. Is the video clear? So I am putting a biopsy forceps. This procedure is done under local anesthesia. We just use a 4% Siloquin spray to anesthetize. Then we take a biopsy and send for histopathology. Are you able to identify the structures? Tongue, uvula, epiglottis? Are you able to identify all the structures? Now we are taking another bit. So this is the tracheal ring, you see. You see the tracheal ring here? This is the trachea, tracheal ring. You see the trachea? You see my pointer, that is a tracheal ring. You are able to appreciate the tracheal ring? Now, next I have told you, you can go ahead and remove the vocal cord. That is known as cordectomy. You see the cordectomy being performed. This patient, by the way, is still alive. Surgery was done 8 years back. So you see the mass tumor in the vocal cord. Are you able to see the right vocal cord? This is the tumor. So we are going to remove the entire vocal cord. That is known as cordectomy. What you are seeing is a magnified image. It is 2 times magnified. I did this surgery 8 years back in Stanley Medical College. See, this is called vocal cord stripping. I am really stripping the entire first level is I am stripping the vocal cord of its mucosa. You see the mass has been totally removed. Are you able to appreciate? The mucus has been taken away. Still I feel there is induration there. The cord has to go. So I am dissecting the cord. Are you able to see me dissecting the cord? That is the anterior commissure area. This is the anterior commissure area, Broyles ligament. So I am really working on the anterior commissure area. So that is the anterior commissure area where the mass is there. So I am really removing it. So you see the entire cord is gone. See, the cord is gone. Empty space. Are you able to see? This is actually the superior aspect of the conus elasticus. This is the lower portion of the conus elasticus is intact. The superior portion of the conus elasticus we have removed. That is actually the vocal cord. And here, this video I am going to show you. It's a huge mass involving the vocal cord. Are you able to see the mass? So we are going to remove the entire mass using a coablator. This surgery was performed about 6 years back. The patient is still talking to me. This is actually the coablator wand. I am debulking the mass. So I will just make it fast forward to save time. You see the mass is being slowly reduced in size, debulked. This will run for half an hour. I don't waste your time. Okay. Now you see I am slowly removing the mass, lifting the mass out of its bed, creating a plane. Mind you, this is a risky procedure because we are sharing the airway with the anesthetist. If the bleeding gets worse, the patient will aspirate and die.